Skye or the Isle of Skye is the largest and most northerly major island in the Inner Hebrides of Scotland. The island's peninsulas radiate from a mountainous centre dominated by the Cuillins, the rocky slopes of which provide some of the most dramatic mountain scenery in the country. Although it has been suggested that the Gaelic Sgitheanach describes a winged shape, there is no definitive agreement as to the name's origins. The island has been occupied since the Mesolithic period, and its history includes a time of Norse rule and a long period of domination by Clan MacLeod and Clan Donald. The 18th century Jacobite risings led to the breaking up of the clan system and subsequent clearances that replaced entire communities with sheep farms, some of which also involved forced emigrations to distant lands. Resident numbers declined from over 20,000 in the early 19th century to just under 9,000 by the closing decade of the 20th century. Skye's population increased by 4% between 1991 and 2001. About a third of the residents were Gaelic speakers in 2001, and although their numbers are in decline, this aspect of island culture remains important. The main industries are tourism, agriculture, fishing and forestry. Skye is part of the Highland Council local government area. The island's largest settlement is Portree, known for its picturesque harbour. There are links to various nearby islands by ferry and, since 1995, to the mainland by a road bridge. The climate is mild, wet and windy. The abundant wildlife includes the golden eagle, red deer and Atlantic salmon. The local flora is dominated by heather moor, and there are nationally important invertebrate populations on the surrounding seabed. Skye has provided the locations for various novels and feature films and is celebrated in poetry and song. Etymology. The first written references to the island are Roman sources such as the Ravenna cosmography, which refers to Citus and Cetis, which can be found on a map by Ptolemy. One possible derivation comes from scitus, an early Celtic word for winged, which may describe how the island's peninsulas radiate out from a mountainous centre. Subsequent Gaelic, Norse and English-speaking peoples have influenced the history of Skye. The relationships between their names for the island are not straightforward. Various etymologies have been proposed, such as the winged isle, or the notched isle, but no definitive solution has been found to date, and the place name may be from an earlier, non-Gaelic language. In the Norse sagas, Skye is called Sgith, for example in the Hakonar saga Hakonarsonar, and a skaldic poem in the Heimskringla from c. 1230 contains a line that translates as, "The hunger battle birds were filled in Skye with blood of foemen killed." The island was also referred to by the Norse as Skye, skaɪ or Cheò. The traditional Gaelic name is t-Eilean Sgitheanach, and t-Eilean Sgitheanach being a more recent and less common spelling. In 1549 Donald Munro, Hydean of the Isles, wrote of Skye, "This isle is Calat Sgitheanach in Irish, that is to say in English the Wingite Isle, be reason it has mony wing eyes and pointis lion firth fra it. Through the dividing of Thurfwa said Locus," but the meaning of this Gaelic name is unclear. Eilean of Cheò, which means Island of the Mist, is a poetic Gaelic name for the island. Geography. At 1,656 square kilometers, Skye is the second largest island in Scotland after Lewis and Harris. The coastline of Skye is a series of peninsulas and bays radiating out from a centre dominated by the Cuillin Hills. Malcolm Slessor suggested that its shape sticks out of the west coast of northern Scotland, like a lobster's claw ready to snap at the fishbone of Harris and Lewis, and W. H. Murray, commenting on its irregular coastline, stated that Skye is 60 miles (100 kilometers) long. But what might be its breadth is beyond the ingenuity of man to state. Martin, a native of the island, reported on it at length in a 1703 publication. His geological observations included a note that there are marcasites black and white, resembling silver ore, near the village Sartle. There are likewise in the same place several stones, which in bigness, shape, and sea, resemble nutmegs, and many rivulets here afford variegated stones of all colours. The Apple's Glen near Loch Fallet has agate growing in it of different sizes and colours. Some are green on the outside, some are of a pale sky colour, and they all strike fire as well as flint. I have one of them by me, which for shape and bigness is proper for a sword handle. Stones of a purple colour flow down the rivulets here after great rains. Martin, a description of the western islands of Scotland. The Black Cuillin, which are mainly composed of basalt and gabbro, include 12 munros and provide some of the most dramatic and challenging mountain terrain in Scotland. The ascent of radiate is one of the longest rock climbs in Britain, and the inaccessible pinnacle is the only peak in Scotland that requires technical climbing skills to reach the summit. These hills make demands of the hill walker that exceed any others found in Scotland, and a full traverse of the Cuillin Ridge may take 15 to 20 hours. The Red Hills to the south are also known as the Red Cuillin. They are mainly composed of granite that has weathered into more rounded hills with many long scree slopes on their flanks. The highest point of these hills is Glenmeig, one of only 2 corbets on Skye. The northern peninsula of Trotternesh is underlain by basalt, which provides relatively rich soils and a variety of unusual rock features. The Kilt Rock is named after the tartan-like patterns in the 105 meters cliffs. The Cuillins is a spectacular series of rock pinnacles on the eastern side of the main spine of the peninsula, and further south is the rock pillar of the Old Man of Storr. Beyond Loch Snizort to the west of Trotternesh is the Waternish Peninsula, which ends in Ardmore Point's double rock arch. Duranish is separated from Waternish by Loch Dunvegan, which contains the island of Isay. The loch is ringed by sea cliffs that reach 295 meters at Waterstein Head. Oolitic loam provides good arable land in the main valley. Lochs Bracadale and Harport and the island of Wiay lie between Duranish and Minginish, which includes the narrower defiles of Talisker and Glen Brittle, and whose beaches are formed from black basaltic sands. Strathard is a relatively small peninsula close to the Cuillin Hills with only a few crofting communities. The island of Cheò lies offshore. The bedrock of Sleat in the south is Torridonian sandstone, which produces poor soils and boggy ground, although its lower elevations and relatively sheltered eastern shores enable a lush growth of hedgerows and crops. The islands of Raasay, Rona, Scalpay and Pabay all lie to the north and east between Skye and the mainland. Towns and villages. Portree in the north at the base of Trotternesh is the largest settlement and is the main service centre on the island. Broadford, the location of the island's only airstrip, is on the east side of the island, and Dunvegan in the northwest is well known for its castle and the nearby Three Chimneys restaurant. The 18th-century Stein Inn on the Waternish coast is the oldest pub on Skye. Caerlarchan is linked to Kyle of Loch Alsh on the mainland by the Skye Bridge, which spans the narrows of Loch Alsh. Uig, the port for ferries to the Outer Hebrides, is on the west of the Trotternesh Peninsula, and Edinburgh is between Dunvegan and Portree. Much of the rest of the population lives in crofting townships scattered around the coastline. Climate. The influence of the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf Stream create a mild oceanic climate. Temperatures are generally cool, averaging 6.5 degrees Celsius in January and 15.4 degrees Celsius in July at Untelmin Trotternesh. Snow seldom lies at sea level and frosts are less frequent than on the mainland. Winds are a limiting factor for vegetation. Southwesterlies are the most common, and speeds of 128 km per hour have been recorded. High winds are especially likely on the exposed coasts of Trotternish and Waternish. In common with most islands of the west coast of Scotland, rainfall is generally high at 1,500 to 2,000 mm per annum, and the elevated Cuillin are wetter still. Variations can be considerable, with the north tending to be drier than the south. Broadford, for example, averages more than 2,870 mm of rain per annum. Trotternish typically has 200 hours of bright sunshine in May, the sunniest month. On the 28th of December 2015, the temperature reached 15 degrees Celsius, beating the previous December record of 12.9 degrees Celsius, set in 2013. History. Prehistory. A Mesolithic hunter-gatherer site dating to the 7th millennium BC at Incorin in Staffan is one of the oldest archaeological sites in Scotland. Its occupation is probably linked to that of the rock shelter at Sand Applecross, on the mainland coast of Wester Ross, where tools made of a mudstone from Incorin have been found. Surveys of the area between the two shores of the Inner Sound and Sound of Raasay have revealed 33 sites with potentially Mesolithic deposits. Finds of bloodstone microliths on the foreshore at Orbost on the west coast of the island near Dunvegan also suggest Mesolithic occupation. These tools probably originate from the nearby island of Rum. Ruver and Denane, an uninhabited peninsula to the south of the Cuillin, has a variety of archaeological sites dating from the Neolithic onwards. There is a 2nd or 3rd millennium BC chambered cairn, an Iron Age promontory fort, and the remains of other prehistoric settlement dating from the Bronze Age nearby. Loch Cheò on the peninsula is linked to the sea by an artificial Viking canal that may date from the later period of Norse settlement. Dunringhill is a ruined Iron Age hill fort on the Strathard Peninsula, which was further fortified in the Middle Ages and may have become the seat of Clan MacKinnon. Early history. The late Iron Age inhabitants of the northern and western Hebrides were probably Pictish, although the historical record is sparse. 3 Pictish symbol stones have been found on Skye and a 4th on Raasay. More is known of the kingdom of Dalriata to the south. Adomnan's Life of Columba, written shortly before 697, portrays the saint visiting Skye, and Adomnan himself is thought to have been familiar with the island. The Irish annals record a number of events on Skye in the later 7th and early 8th centuries, mainly concerning the struggles between rival dynasties that formed the background to the Old Irish language romance Sgitheanach Mac Gartnain. The Norse held sway throughout the Hebrides from the 9th century until after the Treaty of Perth in 1266. However, apart from place names, little remains of their presence on Skye in the written or archaeological record. Apart from the name of Skye itself, all pre-Norse place names seem to have been obliterated by the Scandinavian settlers. Viking heritage is claimed by Clan MacLeod, and Norse tradition is celebrated in the winter fire festival at Dunvegan, during which a replica Viking longboat is set alight. Clans and Scottish rule. The most powerful clans on Skye in the post-Norse period were Clan MacLeod, originally based in Trotternish, and Clan MacDonald of Sleat. Following the disintegration of the Lordship of the Isles, the MacKinnons also emerged as an independent clan, whose substantial landholdings in Skye were centred on Strathard. Clan MacNickail also have a long association with Trotternish, and in the 16th century many of the MacInnes clan moved to Sleat. The MacDonalds of South Uist were bitter rivals of the MacLeods, and an attempt by the former to murder churchgoers at Trumpin in retaliation for a previous massacre on Egg, resulted in the Battle of the Spoiling Dyke of 1578. After the failure of the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745, Flora MacDonald became famous for rescuing Prince Charles Edward Stuart from the Hanoverian troops. Although she was born on South Uist, her story is strongly associated with their escape via Skye, and she is buried at Kilmuir in Trotternish. Samuel Johnson and James Boswell's visit to Skye in 1773 and their meeting with Flora MacDonald in Kilmuir is recorded in Boswell's The Journal of a Tour to the Hebrides. Boswell wrote, "To see drive Samuel Johnson, the great champion of the English Tories, salute Miss Flora MacDonald in the Isle of Skye." Was a striking sight, for though somewhat congenial in their notions, it was very improbable they should meet here. Johnson's word that Flora MacDonald was a name that will be mentioned in history, and if courage and fidelity be virtues mentioned with honour, are written on her gravestone. After this rebellion the clan system was broken up and Skye became a series of landed estates. Of the island in general, Johnson observed, "I never was in any house of the islands, where I did not find books in more languages than one, if I stayed long enough to want them, except one from which the family was removed. Literature is not neglected by the higher rank of the Hebrideans. It need not, I suppose, be mentioned, that in countries so little frequented as the islands, there are no houses where travellers are entertained for money. He that wanders about these wilds, either procures recommendations to those whose habitations lie near his way, or, when night and weariness come upon him, takes the chance of general hospitality. If he finds only a cottage he can expect little more than shelter, for the cottagers have little more for themselves, but if his good fortune brings him to the residence of a gentleman, he will be glad of a storm to prolong his stay. There is, however, one inn by the seaside at Sconser, in Skye, where the post office is kept." Samuel Johnson, A Journey to the Western Islands of Scotland. Skye has a rich heritage of ancient monuments from this period. Dunvegan Castle has been the seat of Clan MacLeod since the 13th century. It contains the fairy flag and is reputed to have been inhabited by a single family for longer than any other house in Scotland. The 18th-century Armadale Castle, once home of Clan Donald of Sleat, was abandoned as a residence in 1925 but now hosts the Clan Donald Centre. Nearby are the ruins of two more MacDonald strongholds, Knock Castle, and Dunscaith Castle, the legendary home of warrior woman, martial arts instructor Sgitheanach. T-Eilean, built in the late 15th century near Cuillins and once a seat of Clan MacKinnon, is another ruin. Clearances in the late 18th century. The harvesting of kelp became a significant activity, but from 1822 on cheap imports led to a collapse of this industry throughout the Hebrides. During the 19th century, the inhabitants of Skye were also devastated by famine and clearances. 30,000 people were evicted between 1840 and 1880 alone, many of them forced to emigrate to the New World. For example, the settlement of Logill on the west coast of Sgitheanach was cleared on 4 August 1830. Every crofter under the age of 70 was removed and placed on board the Midlothian on threat of imprisonment, with those over that age being sent to the poorhouse. The Battle of the Braes involved a demonstration against a lack of access to land and the serving of eviction notices. The incident involved numerous crofters and about 50 police officers. This event was instrumental in the creation of the Napier Commission, which reported in 1884 on the situation in the Highlands. Disturbances continued until the passing of the 1886 Crofters Act, and on one occasion 400 Marines were deployed on Skye to maintain order. The ruins of cleared villages can still be seen at Logill, Boreraig and Sgitheanach in Strathsordale, and Tusdale on Mingenach. Overview of population trends. As with many Scottish islands, Skye's population peaked in the 19th century and then declined under the impact of the clearances and the military losses in the First World War. From the 19th century until 1975, Skye was part of the county of Inverness Shire, but the crofting economy languished, and according to Slessor, generations of UK governments have treated the island people contemptuously, a charge that has been levelled at both Labour and Conservative administrations' policies in the Highlands and Islands. By 1971, the population was less than a third of its peak recorded figure in 1841. However, the number of residents then grew by over 28% in the 30 years to 2001. The changing relationship between the residents and the land is evidenced by Robert Carruthers' remark circa 1852 that there is now a village in Portree containing 300 inhabitants. Even if this estimate is inexact, the population of the island's largest settlement has probably increased sixfold or more since then. During the period, the total number of island residents has declined by 50% or more. The island-wide population increase of 4% between 1991 and 2001 occurred against the background of an overall reduction in Scottish island populations of 3% for the same period. By 2011, the population had risen a further 8.4% to 10,008, with Scottish island populations as a whole growing by 4% to 103,702. Gaelic. Historically, Skye was overwhelmingly Gaelic-speaking, but this changed between 1921 and 2001. In both the 1901 and 1921 censuses, all Skye parishes were more than 75% Gaelic-speaking. By 1971, only Kilmuir parish had more than three-quarters Gaelic speakers, while the rest of Skye ranged between 50 and 74%. At that time, Kilmuir was the only area outside the Western Isles that had such a high proportion of Gaelic speakers. In the 2001 census, Kilmuir had just under half Gaelic speakers, and overall, Skye had 31%, distributed unevenly. The strongest Gaelic areas were in the north and southwest of the island, including Staffan at 61%. The weakest areas were in the west and east. Other areas on Skye ranged between 48% and 25%. Government and politics. In terms of local government, from 1975 to 1996, Skye, along with the neighbouring mainland area of Loch Alsh, constituted a local government district within the Highland Administrative Area. In 1996, the district was included into the Unitary Highland Council, based in Inverness, and formed one of the new council's area committees. Following the 2007 elections, Skye now forms a four-member ward called Cheò. It is currently represented by two independents, one Scottish National Party, and one Liberal Democrat councillor. Skye is in the Highlands electoral region and comprises a part of the Ross, Skye and Inverness West constituency of the Scottish Parliament, which elects one member under the first-past-the-post basis to represent it. Currently this is David Thompson for the SNP. In addition, Skye forms part of the wider Ross, Skye and Lochaber constituency, which elects one member to the House of Commons in Westminster. The present Member of Parliament is Ian Blackford of the Scottish National Party, who took office after the SNP's sweep in the general election of 2015. Prior to this, Charles Kennedy, a Liberal Democrat, had represented the area since the 1983 general election.